The Genesis metaphor, something that has me currently fascinated. I'm digging into what I believe the, creation at this point in time. I just posted a video on the first creation story, and something that I'm finding with incredible consistency in fumbling through this and trying to find my way through and teaching what I believe, or trying to convey, rather, what I believe I'm seeing and what I'm finding, and that more becomes revealed to you. And what I'm going to do is a supplement on the last video I did, and I'll post a link to it below. There's a time where I thought this material was really a kludge. It's full of errors, conflicts. You look at religious material and go, there's a lot of issues here. The more I dig into what I'm doing here, the more I realize is that all exists on the outer shell, the outer carrier part, the analogous terms, the outward-looking stuff is where that exists. That within that is incredible precision, actually, once we locate the template and pieces and parts, that it's not sloppy anymore. I hope this flows okay. I went back and edited something in, and it's an example of how in this material you can find things that don't sound right, but that they're meaningful. This comes from Luke chapter 5, verses 33 through 39, it looks like here. But listen to this. The question about fasting. Then they said to him, John's disciples, like the disciples of the Pharisees, frequently fast and pray, but your disciples eat and drink. Jesus said to them, You cannot make wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them, can you? The days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days. He also told them a parable. No one tears a piece from a new garment and sews it on an old garment. Otherwise, the new will be torn, and the piece from the new will not match the old. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins and will be spilled, and the skins will be destroyed. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, desires new wine, but says the old is good. All right, these play out really in the psyche, but there's something else going on in this teaching that's a transition. First of all, what you catch right off the bat is the question wasn't even answered. Then they said to him, John's disciples, like the disciples of the Pharisees, frequently fast and pray, but your disciples eat and drink. And he says to them, You cannot make wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them, can you? So he's talking about fasting, but it goes off into something that is like, whoa, what does that have to do with the disciples of John's and the disciples of the Pharisees? And who are disciples of John's and Pharisees? Okay, in this case, John represents, John was the Baptist who baptized people in the flesh, not in spirit. Jesus is the one that baptizes them in spirit. So what is that? It sounds like, if I get baptized in water, then I'm reborn is what the idea is. But that's what John was doing. Jesus is doing something different. The baptismal in spirit is going to be something that has to do with you turning inward and rectifying your own past, that is nested in a way that it's more palatable to carry for the masses. So first of all, John represents the past, and it represents the understanding of Christianity, the Pharisees as well. They are the ones who do not understand the nested material. They are teaching it as if it is face value. The wedding guests, you cannot make the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them. So who would the wedding guests be? The bridegroom, and the bride is going to be in the hierarchy is going to be the conscious and the subconscious, and the guests are what they have created. And as long as you are still living that life, they cannot fast. You cannot get rid of your past as long as you are engaged with your past. And then it goes on to say that the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days. So yeah, we got to leave our habits behind in order for those habits to go away. But then it transitions into no one tears a piece from a new garment and sews it on an old garment. Otherwise, the new will be torn, and the piece of the new will not match the old. In all of these verses, we are analogous components of the story. No, I'm sorry. Those are analogous portions of our psyche, that we are that we are the garment. In this case, when that one comes, I am the garment, and I've got my old self and I want to put new self onto my old self. It's not going to work. It'll destroy it. I cannot go on and change my life without resolving my past. Like the DVD, The Secret, tries to tell you to do. Just leave that stuff in place. It's called so what and move around. It's not following the right path. It's telling you to forget the hard part. That's why it's popular. Nobody likes doing the hard part. Okay, so you can't put the new patch on and no one puts new wine into an old wineskin. Suddenly we became the wineskin, okay? No one puts new wine. The wine is analogous for the way your life is, the way your experience is. Nobody puts new way of life into your old self, into your old wineskin. Otherwise, the new wine will burst and the skins, and they will be spilled. It'll ruin our lives if we try to do that. But wine must be put into fresh wineskins, and no one after drinking old wine desires new wine, but says the old is good. So here we have a couple things going on. The new wine must be put into fresh wineskins, so we must have a rebirth to have a new life. You want to move to a new life, you got to resolve the past if you want something new to happen. And no one after drinking old wine desires new wine, but says the old is good. Most people aren't going to do it. Boy, this has elements of many are standing outside the narrow gate where only the solitary will enter in. Many are the outward ways of looking at things. What else does it have in here? Many are called, few are chosen. These are all ways of putting that in cryptically. And if you don't interpret them correctly, they sound like, what is that? It's a mess. Once you interpret them in the psyche and realize what they're doing, and they're transitioning from the old to the new, from outward looking to inward looking, to resolving the past, is all in here. Suddenly, they're very precise. So one thing I want to talk about in this video is in one of the verses, verse 26 they had in Genesis, there's a point where there's one that said, then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. So it looks like we go from a polytheism to a monotheism right there, which sounds weird. And I thought, well, that might be an error. If you go upstream to the Babylonian creation myth, they use gods. In fact, the earliest form of your issues that you have are called gods. That's where that comes on board to begin with, as something that is very powerful. They call them gods at first. If you go read the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, that at first what happens is they're so powerful that they rule. And think about that in our life when we're acting out or something's happening. Those are called gods. They're bad gods, though. It's this anger that comes out, that when it comes out, it's given God status, bad God status, because it's so powerful it takes over. At any rate, there's multiple things going on there, and I know that the Genesis is derived from that. I can see that. And I was thinking, well, maybe there was somehow a verbal slip up there or something like that, but I'm thinking maybe that's intentional. I'm not looking at it from the standpoint of the religious doctrine in any way, shape, or form, but that some wise person knew that template was there and was doing something and was teaching something, and they knew that template existed elsewhere too, that people knew this that were Hindus or wherever in the world, that this was material that wise people knew this. A few people would get this. I think that perhaps what I see maybe is, what if that's an instruction? It's a theory. What if that's an instruction saying that for this material, you don't read it with the idea that there are multiple gods, but one God does everything? I don't know. That's just an idea. If it's there on purpose, what purpose would it be? If it's there on accident, everything else is so precise. Although there's two creation stories and something is going on here more than what I see. Anyway, I wanted to talk about that a little bit just because it was a theory. It's like that's still a strange one. How does it go from our image to in his image? How does it make that why does it make that transition there? And although this isn't really a part of Genesis, a bigger part of the structure that I'm beginning to recognize, or at least that I think I see, is that as each new branch, new religion, something comes along, as Judaism starts, it is emerging from Babylonian and Egyptian. And who becomes the enemies? The Babylonians and the Egyptians. There are others as well. Each time there's a start of a new template, a creation in an area, it's going to be taking on whoever is on the path is the good guys. And the story is written in that way. So how crazy does this sound? If you are reading it as a Jewish person, the Jews are the ones that are God's chosen people. We need to defeat our enemy. That's going to carry in the population. That's perfect analogs. If you translate it inward, the Jew is an analog, which means the seeking person. And Gentiles and whoever else, or anybody, even if they are Jewish people holding the Torah, but they're not turning it inward, they are the Gentiles. They are not the Jews. But that's analogs. They're not the seeking ones. So they've got it nested in such a way that you're not going to stop it. Number one. Number two, the people that are holding it think it's about them. And it's derived from the last source is your enemy. You're emerging from them. All of this fits in the culture. Then you look back on it in history and go, I see all the elements for this happening. It must have been real. They just created the stories in their time and created the enemies that way. So you might be Jason on the hero's journey. And the way that type of myth works is that Jason is who you are when you are going back to take back your life, when you've decided you are going to go change your past. Okay, so that is who you are. Or you could be Moses doing the same thing, leading the million Jews, 2.5 million, whatever, across the desert to live for 40 years. Yeah, those are wonderful analogs that are, they're kind of over the top there, aren't they? But they're carrying your Moses is the person that is coming back to, is the part of you in this story that is coming back to lead yourself to the promised land. And if you look for the similarities still, Jason in the Argonauts is going back. King Pelias actually represents his earlier self, who has control of the land until, that represents our early self before we go back and say, I'm done, I'm taking over my own life again. Moses, same thing, except now you are leaving Pharaoh behind. You are leaving your past behind, and you are entering through into the, you got a passageway right there, the clashing rocks or the Red Sea. The elements continue to be there. What I want to do is cover another verse. That was just theoretical. That other one I'm kicking it around. I believe these are purposeful. I really do. I think there's something going on that is a little more structured once you turn it inward like this. I was going to talk about that a little bit. How do I do that? Okay. At this point, when I'm reading something, I'm going to use some short examples. Reading Jesus. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You read that. And what my head, when I read it, it translates into my head. Blessed is me when I get rid of all of this stuff that I'm carrying. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be healed, or whatever that is. When I read that, I hear that as, blessed am I when I resolve the issues that I'm carrying inside, for I will mourn my past. Judge not, lest you be judged. Judging is when you name something, when you, in life, as you are. What are we judging? I'm judging that I got hurt. I'm judging that I like this or that I don't like that. All of those are judging. You let all of that go. If you don't let it go, you're going to experience that. Judge not, lest you be judged. Judge not. Don't name things. Don't give it a value. We can go to Lao Tzu in here. Naming is the origin of all particular things. I read both of those as the same thing. When I decide what something is, that gives it its life. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Once you play it out in the psyche, it suddenly becomes the same thing, regardless of its source of origin. Those are short verses. The stories get bigger. They contain it a little bit differently. I make that transition. And that's what I'm working with here, is trying to do that same thing, is making that transition. However, these are unfamiliar to me. And you just work with them until you see how they work in the psyche. It's like a mental reverse engineering until you see how it works. I don't know how to describe it. It's a process I think anybody can do in their mind, but you have to wire your head to read this stuff like that. This is weird. It might be helpful. I always describe how we have modern day biases, and it's incredibly difficult for us to understand the complexity of the stories. We don't take the time, but we don't understand and realize that this was their media then. They're intelligent people. They are as smart as we are, and now they are burgeoning massive amounts of people. What do you think they're doing? This is their media, so it's hard to get to their place. I look at it this way. It's almost as if there are various gaming platforms. Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, Taoism. I know I'm being sacrilegious for some people. Stick with me. This is just a mental thing, a comparison. And that in those platforms, as they move around, people continue to add to them. Engineers keep going, oh, I like that. I'm going to add another one to it. I see you left a link over here. I'm going to, create a story off of your story that also fits on that template. So people are this is well known, obviously, because the template is all over from various places. This is something that is known by people, because they're making stories and they appear all over. Duh, So here we are then realizing that there is a layer in there that is like the third layer that we get to once you get to that right there. And that structure is the same regardless of where it is. And it's the structure of the cosmos. It's the structure of how, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla, that's the closest to it, honestly. Creation is teaching us that we emerge from that universe, from the functionality of it, that we exist within the functionality of it, that things continue to cycle, that there is cause and effect, that when there's a birth of something or when there's a creation, whenever we decide we like or don't like something, that we begin to make who and what we are, and that we become products of that, and that life flows through that energy in the manner of the way we continue to hold our life experiences up here, and that we can go in and interact with those and change those life experiences to change our course. We can remove what is there that is wrong by interacting with the emotional state of it until the emotional state is no longer something that we feel derogatory inside of us, and we can replace it with different thinking that is more positive to us, and that our life will flow in that way. That is really what the core teaches. But that's not going to keep people very busy, is it? Okay, I want to cover a different verse here. Let's take a look at one that I've come to some... there's something else that emerged for me in this one right here. All right, let's beef it up from the last video. First of all, and God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So we determined, and I'm still good with this, that is the mental hierarchy right there. The sky is the upper self. The dry land is our consciousness. That is where the physical world occurs. And the seas, the waters gathered underneath, where everything emerges from, is the subconscious. That's what is going to hold all of the things that continue to come out later. And God saw that it was good. I have no additions to that one. However, as we move on to the verse, then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. So, you know what? The first thing I notice is it almost sounds like there's a doubling up of something right there. There's no need for it. It's good for the story, perhaps, but I think that these happen sometimes to get your attention. And what I see is happening here now is that the first one, "Let the earth put forth vegetation," and God said, this is the higher self. This is us calling things into life. This is naming things. It is plants yielding seeds and fruit trees of every kind. It's not just the good stuff. It's all things. Everything that is going to emerge from us is going to be there. And of course, yes, later on, of course, and we determined this is that this is a cause and effect right here. The earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind. So whatever is nested in us is going to emerge. And when it does emerge, we can look at it and determine that whatever the quality of it is or the nature of it is based on whatever we're holding. We're not going to lash out against something we don't have issues with, but we will lash out against something we do have issues with. And that helps us to recognize this right there. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning the third day. So I just wanted to say that actually it's more than that. Actually, what we see there is it's calling it into being. It got called into being when it's like naming it. Let the earth put forth vegetation. Said, named, classified, judged. All of those mean the same thing when we make the mental commitment. So that right there is making the mental commitment. And so guess what? It happens. There you go. Cause and effect. So in that whole verse, I see then that first of all, there's the creation of the mental structure right there. The three that is there, the thinking, the higher self, the consciousness, the subconscious. And then what happens is that what goes into them is called into being. Now God has created, or all of the plants, all of the things that are going to emerge from us are going to, the potential is there for anything. So right here, we are actually naming things and becoming those things in this story. It's going to happen different in the second one, but that's what they're covering here. Okay, that was it on this video. I think that gods, what's going on there, the transition from gods to single God, is probably purposeful, and it might simply be, the instruction. That's the only thing I can think of. You go to other material and gods are going to be doing the job. It doesn't matter. It's just various parts of up here. Whatever is working against you or working for you are all parts of the human psyche. You can call it one God. You could call it multiple gods. It doesn't matter. This sounds like just an instruction saying in this material, we're going with the monotheism. In this creation, this is how this structure is going to work. They've established that as a rule right in the beginning. What I want to do in this video before ending it is take a look at the Tao Te Ching. This is the very first part of the Tao Te Ching. This is creation without creation story, without it being nested in that way. The Tao, that's the way. That is all existence. That's the cosmos. That's everything. The way of existence that can be told is not the eternal way of existence. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. If you leave everything unnamed, the potential is always there for anything. The unnameable is the eternally real, which just goes on to say that a little bit further. However, it sets up the next one. Naming is the origin of all particular things. That is where in Jesus' work, if you judged something, that is where God just named, or, God just called something into existence in Genesis. Right here, we're seeing it as if we play them all out in the psyche. This is me judging. This is me naming. This is me doing. This is when things start for me. Naming is the origin of all particular things. This is the same spot on the template that we just covered in Genesis. It's matching up that same spot right there. Then it goes on to say, free from desire, you realize the mystery, or caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. So whatever you've named is your desire. Once you get caught in that, once you're caught in desire, once you've named something, you see only the manifestations. You see the result of it. Judge not, lest you be judged. For the measure with which you judge others will be likewise judged to you. Something to that effect. That's this right here. You're going to experience your life based on what you have named. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Let it all go. Life will be wonderful. All right. How cool is all that? One thing it's important to note, I've made this clear in previous videos, but it's such a big thing, it's hard to keep all the parts close by. But that these are different genres of teaching material. They're different styles of carrying the story. It can be that template can be carried in a variety of ways. But what you see here in Taoism, or if you're reading the Dhammapada in Buddhism, it is not the same style as a hero's journey or a religion. It still contains the nested teachings. It just doesn't do so in a story format. It does so in a format that is more conducive to the person who goes on the path and looks for the master on the hill and says, "Master, where do I come from?" The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Now you're supposed to go figure that out, but it is not a mystery story sort of a thing. It is a cryptic verse. You're always supposed to figure them out. I'm the only one putting them in plain language. But that's, I think what I'm finding here is something that they were doing very prevalently. And it just takes time to see it is all. That there's no magic to it. And I've said this recently, but I'll say it again here because I think it's important for people getting on board and looking at this, that it is all completely mental, that it only fits in a structure. It took a while to get here, though. It was incredibly nebulous. What I am passing along is the result of lots of processes of elimination, mentally playing things out for years until you start seeing something that is structured. And that structure exists as a teaching tool in different ways. It can be in structured verse. It still starts out with you in the beginning and that you name things and that sort of stuff. It's just not doing so in a manner that it sounds like God is doing it. It's you doing it. Here, I'm rambling. Let me nutshell it. It's this. How many of us see patterns in material from antiquity? If you're open to reading a lot of things, you begin seeing a lot of similarities and think people are copying stories, something. Flood stories appearing in a variety of places. And then other patterns begin to emerge the more I read it, and I'm just kind of hooked into it. So I'm reading it and reading it and reading it and looking for the patterns and gradually transitioning. The idea of where I am now with it, that it plays out completely in the psyche, was a very gradual transition and understanding what they were doing with the analogs. But at some point in time, what I finally establish is what that template is, what the pattern very specifically is based upon, the human life. And then you can look at the material and realize that they're telling stories that fit on that template. Now I can go straight to the template. I'm no longer trying to figure out what they're doing. I see what they're doing. And that's where I am, I think, right now. And the difficult part then is trying to figure out what they are, what analogs are they using? This is 3,500 years ago, intelligent people. We are so far removed from them. But I think as long as the approach is objective, understanding that they've got something going on, not dismissing it, not invoking something supernatural. If it's not understood, just set it off to the side and go, keep reading other stuff. At some point, you're going to read enough of something that you're going to go, hey, I see where that fits. That's matching something over here. We got great opportunities. We can look at things side by side, which is, they couldn't. We have a great advantage. It's just a matter of time. Anyway, okay, that's it for this video. I just wanted to update that. That doubling up on that one right there is naming it. And then it comes into being. And it's anything right there. The potential is right there. But it fits with the naming. It's just a very verbose way of saying something like, naming is the origin of all particular things. They both mean the same thing. They're getting to the same place. What is the other one? It's producing trees and the fruit, all different manner, all particular things. They just started naming a bunch of them. And it's stuff that grows. It's stuff that emerges, though, cyclically. That's important, too. Yeah. That might be showing a cycle right there as well. We know that plants grow up and return. Anyway, okay. Hope this was fun. Love one another. I'll see you in the next video.